Thank you for sitting down with us today, Ms. Pogue. Could you tell us a little bit about your son?
My son, Joseph Young Jr., was a very loving and giving young man, even from a little boy. He left high school and went to the Army, served in Desert Storm, came back and he got married while he was in Germany and lived for a while in Fort Polk, Louisiana, and he got out of the service and came back to Columbia and became a car salesman. And that was his niche. He loved being a salesman. He was a people person, and he did very well in that profession. August 10th, 2004, shortly after he reported to work at the car dealership, he suffered an aneurysm and a stroke, and 5 days later was declared brain dead. We buried him the day before his 33rd birthday. To say that it's difficult losing a child is an understatement because he was my only child. But I'm very thankful to his wife that she agreed for him to be an organ donor. We were able to donate both kidneys, his heart, and his liver. So in his death, he's keeping 4 people alive, and his mom, that makes me very proud. I had other interest for my retirement, but your circumstances changes your, or change your priorities, I guess I should say.
Yes, ma'am.
So since 2006, I have been a trained volunteer for LifePoint. And I talk about organ donation to anybody who's willing to listen. I go to churches, I go to health fairs, I go to Rotary Club meetings. I carry information in my car usually. So if I strike up a conversation with somebody in the grocery store or in Jiffy Lube, I've got information that I can pass out to them because this is truly my mission now. I'm honoring my son's memory, I do believe, through educating people about organ donation. African Americans have a lot of misconceived notions about organ donation, and it is my mission to dispel the myths that people have. I think it's vitally important for our people to know more about organ donation. All of us as a people pretty much know somebody on dialysis. I mean, that's near to a lot of us. If it's not in our families, it's people in our churches, people in our neighborhoods, but we know somebody who's on dialysis. And my motto is, why should I let any good organs or anything that anybody else could use go back to the dust when it can keep somebody else alive? The Lord decided that it was time for my son to leave this earthly body, but he lives within me, and he lives within his family, his daughters, 2 of who I am raising now, because their mother passed away very tragically 7 months after my son did. And within a 6-year period after my son died, I have lost 17 people on my side of the family. But I still stand. God gives me the strength to do what I do. And my mission is to educate African Americans. Well, not just African Americans, but anybody who's willing to listen. Because I do go to other fairs that are other persuasions.
Yes,
but I think it's very, very important for us as a people.
You spoke of misconceptions. What are just a few misconceptions?
One main one is people feel like if they sign up to be an organ donor and something happened to them and they ended up in the emergency room, that the doctors would not do all they could to save their lives. And that's not true. When you go in an emergency room, a doctor doesn't have time to look in your wallet to look at your license. to see if you're an organ donor or not. His job is to try to save your life. In South Carolina, there are some very strict laws on the books pertaining to organ donation. I found this out after I became a volunteer. And I'm learning more about organ donation all the time. But the doctors, the law is that once you become so low in your brain functioning, by law, LifePoint family counselors have to come in and talk to that person's family and ask them if they will be willing to allow them to be an organ donor. A lot of times the family already knows that their family member has signed up to be an organ donor, but oftentimes not. And it's very difficult, because that happened to me, because I was in total denial. I thought my son was going to go to Health South for therapy, and he was going to be fine. But that wasn't the case. And it was very difficult. At first, I wouldn't talk to the family counselors because I thought it was too soon. Again, I was in total denial. I thought my son was going to be better. But when they came and talked to me, they couldn't have been more empathetic, sympathetic, answering all of our questions, just being so kind and so patient, and understanding what we were about to go through, the impending grief that we were going to be facing. So that's why I feel like what I do as a volunteer is so important, to educate people on the front end. So if they do have the misfortune of having to deal with a situation like I had to deal with my son, they would be more educated and more understanding about what was happening. People sometimes feel like their death may be hastened or come more quickly if doctors find out that they're organ donors, and that's not going to happen either. We now have a donor registry separate from motor vehicle that people can go online and sign up to register. And if by chance someone comes in with a severe brain injury that it doesn't look like they may survive, then the doctors at that point would go in the registry and see whether or not that person has signed up. If they have, that takes a lot of pressure off of the family, because when I go out and volunteer, I tell people, if you decide that you want to be a donor, then you need to talk to your family, talk to people who are close to you, so if something should happen, they will know. But the registry takes a lot of pressure off of family members if someone is already signed up. Some other people feel like they need to go back to heaven with what they came to earth with. And I try to explain to people, that's not going to happen. People lose hair, people lose teeth, people lose a lot of things through surgery. So you may not go back to heaven with what you came here. So and part of that, I'm told, is a belief brought over from Africa. They want to be intact when they go back to heaven. But most times, we've had something removed that won't happen. And so I try to dispel that myth that we need to think about lives that we can save as we leave this earth. I have it in my will with my attorney that I want everything that can be possibly used to be removed, because I'm not going to need it where I'm planning on going. And I love going to churches because I can talk differently at churches than I can at a health fair, because at a health fair out in the public, you don't know what people believe. But if people are in church, then odds are they will more than likely believe what I'm believing. And so I have been able to help a lot of people through talking about my son and what we went through with his death. I've helped a lot of people make a decision to become organ donors. They seem to understand better the process. I have learned as a volunteer, well, when the neurologist went in to examine my son for the first time, it was a neurologist that had treated me over a period of about 20 years, so I knew this man well. When he came out of my son's room, he couldn't look me in the face. He was so distraught because of the condition that my son was in. I have found from going to different trainings that there are 3 simple tests that someone can do to determine severe brain injury. Number 1, we're all familiar with, is light to the pupils. If the eyes don't get, the pupils don't get small from the light, then there's some brain injury. If you put cold water in someone's ear and they don't flinch, there's some serious brain damage. And if you put a tongue depressor down somebody's throat and they don't have gag reflex, there's some serious brain injury. And I'm assuming that the doctor did tests similar to that, if not those exact tests, and why he was just distraught when he came out of the room. But again, I was still in denial. I just was so sure that because of my son's age, that he would go to therapy and be okay. But then, the night of the 4th day after his stroke and aneurysm, a nurse was very kind, and she took me away from his room because they say the last sense that people lose in the dying process is hearing. And she told me, she said, you need to know his brain is continuing to bleed and it's continuing to swell and it's not going to get any better. She said, I'm going to put a chair by his bed and you can sit and talk to him as long as you want. I'm going to let the rail down. And I did that. And I told him everything that I could think of that I wanted him to know from me. From the time I felt him move inside of me until up to that moment. And I told him, I said, we got about 40 people in the waiting room. All of them are out there for you. I said, people all across the country are praying for your healing. I said, and I know God hears those prayers. I know he always heals. He just doesn't always heal on this side. My faith has kept me strong, and I'm very grateful that I can share this story with others. And I pray that nobody else will ever have to go through something like this. But life is such that people get sick, people have accidents, things happen. And people leave earlier than we would want them to. But I feel like I can continue my son's legacy of being a loving, caring, and giving kind of person through educating people about organ donation. And again, that's my mission.
Well, thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.